Hello, my friends. Welcome back to English Unleashed. I'm Tom. Today's podcast is based on one of the most important modern books about learning. The book is called Ultralearning, and it is written by Scott Young. In this podcast, I will not read the book to you. Instead, I will explain the best ideas, the most useful points, and the deep lessons from this book in easy, clear English. This podcast is for you if you are learning English, but it is also for you if you are learning anything else in life. The author shows us that learning does not have to be slow, confusing, or painful. He shows us that learning can be intense, which means deeply focused and strong, but still meaningful and human. In this episode, you will hear how people teach themselves languages in months, not years. You will learn about people who master difficult subjects like math, science, or art without schools or teachers. Most importantly, you will learn how you can change the way you learn English. You will learn the best ideas from this book in simple English, so you can use them in real life, step by step. Let's begin. In the first chapter, the author does not begin with theory. Theory means abstract ideas, ideas that live only in the mind. Instead, he begins with a story, a real story. He tells us about a challenge he gave himself. A challenge means a difficult task that tests your ability. The author decided to learn the full 4-year computer science curriculum from MIT. MIT is a very famous university in the United States. Normally, students study this material for 4 years. They attend classes, they have teachers, they take exams. The author decided to do something different. He wanted to learn the same material, but by himself, all by himself. No teachers, no classes, no official exams. And he wanted to do it in just 1 year. This idea sounds crazy to many people. Crazy here means very unusual or hard to believe. But Scott, the author, did it. He studied every day. He watched lectures. He solved problems. He struggled. Struggle here means to try very hard even when something is difficult. By the end of the year, he had completed the full program. This experience changed the way he thought about learning. And this is where the idea of ultra-learning begins. Ultra-learning is not just learning fast. It is learning deeper and more directly. The author explains that most people learn in a passive way. Passive means you receive information, but you do not actively use it. For example, you watch videos, you read books, you listen to lectures. These things are not bad, but alone, they are not enough. Ultra-learning is active. Active means you do things, you try, you make mistakes, you correct them. So, in the first chapter, the author introduces many people who used ultra-learning. One man learned 4 languages in 1 year. Another learned how to draw realistic portraits in months. Someone else mastered advanced math without school. These people are not geniuses. A genius is someone with very high natural intelligence. very high natural talent. The author makes this very clear. These learners are normal people. What made them different was not talent, was not intelligence. It was how they learned. Ultralearning is not vague. Vague means unclear or not specific. For example, I want to improve my English someday is very vague. But I want to hold a 30-minute conversation in English about my job in 3 months is clear. Clarity is very important in ultralearning. Clarity means knowing exactly what you are trying to do. The author also talks about fear in learning. Many people are afraid to start, afraid of failure, afraid of looking stupid. Failure means not succeeding. Ultra learners accept failure early. They know that mistakes are not signs of weakness. They are signs of learning. This idea is very important for English learners. When you speak English and make mistakes, you are not bad at English. You are using English. And using something is how you learn it. The author explains that schools often protect students from failure. Protect means keep safe from harm. But this protection can slow learning. Ultralearning removes protection. This does not mean being cruel to yourself. No, it means being honest. If you cannot speak, you practice speaking. If you cannot understand, you practice understanding. Not later, not one day, but now. So, in the first chapter, the author also talks about time. Most people learning takes a long time because it feels slow. Ultralearning requires strong attention. Not all day, not forever, but during learning time, your focus is deep. Deep focus means your mind is not jumping between many things. This idea will come back many times in this book. All right, in the second chapter, the author asks an important question. Why does this kind of learning work so well? This is a very honest question. Scott does not say ultralearning is magic. Magic means something that works without explanation. Instead, he explains that ultralearning works because it follows how the human brain really learns. Many traditional learning systems focus on comfort. Comfort means feeling safe and relaxed. Comfort feels good, but comfort is not always helpful. For example, when you only read English and never speak, you may feel comfortable, but your speaking still does not grow. Ultralearning works because it creates productive discomfort. Okay, 2 difficult words here. Discomfort means a feeling that is slightly unpleasant. So, productive discomfort means this unpleasant feeling helps you grow. It helps you work better. When something is a little difficult, your brain pays more attention. Attention, as I said before, means where your mind is focused. So the author explains that learning happens when the brain notices a gap. A gap is a space between what you know and what you do not know, and what you want to know. If the gap is too big, you feel lost, you feel confused, you feel unsure. If the gap is too small, you feel bored, you feel not interested. So ultralearning tries to stay in the middle. This middle place is where learning is fastest. The author talks about effort. Effort means using energy to do something difficult. Many people believe effort is bad. They think learning should be easy all the time. But effort is not the enemy. The enemy is wasted effort. Wasted effort means working hard on the wrong thing. For example, memorizing long word lists without using the words is wasted effort. Ultralearning works because effort is directed. Directed means guided toward a clear goal. You do not practice everything. You practice the most important things. Scott gives an example from sports. A tennis player does not just play games all day. They practice specific movements. They repeat difficult shots. This is true for language learning too. If you want to speak English, you must practice speaking, not only listening, not only reading. This sounds simple, but many learners avoid it. So, the author explains that avoidance is natural. What is avoidance? Avoidance means staying away from something uncomfortable. Okay? Let me say that again. Staying away from something uncomfortable. Avoidance. Ultralearning removes avoidance. It asks a simple question. What is the hardest part of this skill? And then it says, start there. Another reason ultralearning works is feedback. Feedback means information that tells you if you are right or wrong. In school, feedback is often slow. You take an exam, weeks later, you get a grade. But the brain learns better with fast feedback. When feedback is fast, you can adjust quickly. Adjust means change what you are doing. For example, when you speak English and someone looks confused, that is feedback. When they understand you and respond naturally, that is also feedback. Ultralearning seeks feedback instead of hiding from it. The author also explains something very important about memory. Memory is not like a box where information is stored forever. Memory is more like a path. A path becomes stronger when you walk on it many times. If you do not use information, the path becomes weak. So, ultralearning uses memory actively. You recall information. Recall means bring information back from memory. You do not just review notes. You test yourself. This is hardest, but much more effective. At the end of this chapter, the author makes a powerful point. Learning is not about time. It is about quality of attention and practice. Someone can study English for 10 years without improving. Another person can improve greatly in 1 year. The difference is not intelligence, it is method. And this leads us to the next chapter. All right, chapter 3, Metalearning, learning how to learn. This chapter introduces a new word, meta-learning. Meta means about itself. So meta-learning means learning about learning. At first, this idea may sound strange, but it is actually very simple. Before starting a journey, you look at a map. The map does not move you forward, but it helps you choose the right direction. Meta-learning is the map. The author explains that many people skip this step. They start learning immediately. Starting quickly feels productive. But without meta-learning, without knowing how you learn, effort can go in the wrong direction. So the author gives an example. Imagine you want to learn to play the piano. If you do not understand what pianists actually do, you may practice the wrong things. The same is true for language learning. If you think learning English means memorizing grammar rules, you may ignore listening and speaking. So, meta-learning asks important questions. What does skill really look like? How do experts practice? What are the main parts of this skill? The author explains that every skill has components. Components are smaller parts that make a whole. Language has many components. There is pronunciation, which means how words sound. There is vocabulary. There is grammar. There is listening. There is speaking, reading, and writing. Meta-learning helps you see which components matter most for your goal. If your goal is conversation, speaking and listening are central. Central means important. Now, this sounds obvious, but many learners spend most of their time on reading and grammar, maybe because they are easier. Meta-learning helps you design learning that fits your real life. Instead of dreaming about perfect study plans, you create realistic ones. Another important part of meta-learning is research. Research means collecting information. The author suggests simple research, not academic research. This research includes watching how experts work, reading about learning strategies, understanding common mistakes. For example, many English learners believe fluency comes from perfect grammar. Research shows fluency comes from automatic use. It comes from practice, daily practice. Automatic means you do not think consciously about every single word. So, this understanding changes how you practice. The author also talks about learning myths. A myth is a belief that many people accept, but that is not true. One learning myth is that talent matters more than practice. Another myth is that adults cannot learn language as well. The author challenges these false beliefs with real examples. Adults can learn very well when methods are right. Meta-learning helps remove false beliefs. Now, at the end of this chapter, the author gives a gentle warning. Do not spend all your time planning. Planning feels safe, but learning happens in action. So, meta-learning, learning about learning, should be short but thoughtful. You look at the map, then you walk. For English learners, this means understanding what matters, then practicing it. Not someday, not later. Now, today. All right, Chapter 4. Focus, the power of deep attention. In this chapter, the author talks about something very simple, but very rare. He talks about focus. Focus means giving your full attention to one thing. Most people believe they are focused, but in reality, their attention is divided. Divided means split into many small pieces. You may be studying English, but also checking your phone. You may be listening, but also thinking about something else. The brain does not like this. The author explains that the brain learns best when attention is deep. Deep attention means your mind stays with one task, without jumping. Jumping means moving quickly from one thought to another. Ultralearning requires periods of deep focus. Not all day, not forever, but when you learn. But when you learn, you really learn. So the author explains that focus is not about willpower. Focus is about design. It is about the way you arrange your environment. For example, if your phone is next to you, it will pull your attention. It will drag and attract your attention. If your study space is quiet and simple, focus becomes easier. The author also talks about distraction, things that break your attention. Distractions are not only phones or noise. Thoughts can also distract you. You may worry about the future. You may think about mistakes from the past. Ultralearning encourages single tasking. Single tasking means doing one thing at a time. Multitasking means doing many things at once. It feels efficient, but it reduces learning. The author explains that when attention is shallow, learning becomes shallow. Shallow means not deep. You may feel busy, but progress is small. This is important for English learners. Speaking while thinking in your first language is not strong speaking. The author suggests short periods of strong focus. For example, 20 or 30 minutes of full attention is powerful. After that, rest is important. Rest means stopping and letting the mind recover. Ultralearning respects energy. It respects your mental strength. But this chapter also talks about boredom. Boredom often appears when attention is weak. When you focus deeply, even simple tasks become interesting. Here is an example. A person learning to draw may spend 1 hour drawing a single object. At first, this sounds boring, but with full attention, the learner sees more details. This deep seeing improves skill. In language learning, deep focus means listening carefully to meaning, not just sounds. It means noticing how words connect. This kind of attention is tiring, but it is effective. The author ends this chapter with a reminder. Focus is not something you have. It is something you build. And you build it by protecting your attention. Chapter 5. Directness. Learn the skill by doing the skill. This chapter introduces one of the most powerful ideas in the book. The idea is called directness. Directness means learning something by doing the exact thing you want to be good at. This sounds obvious, but many people do the opposite. For example, someone wants to speak English, so they read grammar books. Grammar books are not useless, but they are indirect. Indirect means not straight, not immediate. Direct learning for speaking is speaking. Direct learning for listening is listening. The author explains that schools often teach indirectly. Students prepare for exams, not for real use. As a result, students may pass tests but cannot use the skill in real life. Ultralearning rejects this. It asks a simple question. What does success look like? If success is having a conversation, then learning should include conversations. If success is writing emails, then learning should include writing emails. The author gives an example from medicine. Medical students do not only read books, they practice with real patience. Under supervision. Supervision means guidance from someone experienced. This is direct learning. In language learning, directness may feel scary. Speaking with real people includes mistakes. Mistakes make learning real. Scott explains that indirect learning feels safe because it hides weakness. Direct learning shows weakness, but weakness is information. Information helps improvement. At the end of this chapter, the author makes a very important point. Direct learning feels slower at first. Why? Because you face difficulty immediately. But over time, progress becomes faster. Indirect learning feels fast at first. You read many pages, you feel smart. But later, progress slows or stops. So ultralearning chooses the difficult beginning for a better ending. For English learners, this means speaking early, listening deeply, using English before you feel ready, because readiness comes from use, not before it. Chapter 6. Drill. Attack your weakest points. In this chapter, the author talks about drill. Drill means focused practice on a very specific weakness. Many people misunderstand this word. They think drill means boring repetition. But in ultralearning, drill has a different meaning. Drill means breaking a skill into parts and improving the weakest part. The author explains that many learners practice what they are already good at. This feels comfortable. But comfort does not create growth. Ultralearning looks for discomfort again. It asks, what part of this skill is stopping me? For an English learner, this could be pronunciation. It could be listening speed. It could be forming sentences quickly. So, drill focuses on one problem at a time. The author gives an example from sports. A basketball player may practice only free throws for an hour. They are not playing a full game. They are fixing a weakness. This kind of practice feels narrow. Narrow means small and specific. But narrow practice leads to broad improvement. The author explains that drill works because it increases signal. Okay, what does signal mean? Signal means useful information. When practice is general, feedback is general. It is unclear. When practice is specific, feedback is specific. It is clear. Clear feedback helps the brain adjust. It helps it change. In language learning, drill may mean repeating difficult sounds. It may mean practicing sentence patterns. Patterns are common structures. For example, if forming past tense is difficult, you practice past tense sentences. Not everything, only that part. But the author warns against mindless repetition. Mindless means without thinking. Repeating something without attention does not help. Drill requires awareness. Awareness means noticing what you are doing. You notice mistakes. You correct them. This kind of practice is tiring. It uses a lot of energy. But it is powerful. The author explains that drill should be short and intense. After drilling, you return to full practice. Full practice means using the whole skill again. This helps integrate the improved part into real use. For English learners, this means drilling pronunciation, then speaking again. Drill is not forever, it is a tool. Used correctly, it creates breakthroughs. A breakthrough means a sudden improvement. Chapter 7. Retrieval. The power of remembering. This chapter focuses on memory, but not memory in the way many people think. The author explains that memory does not improve by reviewing alone. Review feels safe, but the brain learns more when it struggles to remember. This struggle is called retrieval. Retrieval means pulling information out of your memory. For example, answering a question without looking at notes is retrieval. The author explains that retrieval strengthens memory. Each time you retrieve information, the memory becomes stronger. Stronger means easier to access later. This is similar to using a muscle. A muscle grows when you use it. Memory grows when you retrieve. The author explains that forgetting is not failure. Forgetting means not remembering something. Forgetting is part of learning. When you forget and then remember again, the memory becomes deeper. Deep memory lasts longer. Many learners are afraid of tests. Tests feel like judgment. They feel like they are being evaluated. Ultralearning uses tests as tools, not judgments. Self-testing is powerful. Self-testing means testing yourself. For example, you listen to English and summarize it from memory. You try to explain something without notes. You answer questions. The author explains that retrieval feels harder than review. But harder does not mean worse. Harder often means better. This is another example of productive discomfort. Scott also talks about spacing. Spacing means leaving time between practice sessions. When practice is spaced, retrieval becomes harder. But this difficulty strengthens memory. For example, remembering a word after 2 days is harder than after 2 minutes. But remembering after 2 days creates stronger memory. Ultralearning uses this. It does not repeat everything every day. It revisits important things over time. The author explains that retrieval builds confidence. Confidence means trust in your ability. When you can remember without help, you feel capable. For English learners, retrieval means speaking without reading. It means answering questions without translation. It means recalling words in real life. This feels scary at first, but over time, it feels natural. At the end of this chapter, the author makes a clear statement. If you want to remember something, practice remembering it. Not looking at it, remembering it. Chapter 8. Learning from mistakes. In this chapter, the author talks about feedback. Feedback means information that tells you how well you are doing. Without feedback, learning becomes slow and confusing. Imagine throwing a ball in the dark. You do not know if you hit the target. Feedback turns the light on. The author explains that many learners avoid feedback. Why? Because feedback often comes with mistakes. Mistakes can hurt the ego. Ego means the part of us that wants to feel good and capable. Ultralearning does not protect the ego. It protects learning. The author explains that there are different kinds of feedback. Some feedback is external. It comes from outside. For example, a teacher corrects you. A listener looks confused. A test shows a wrong answer. These are external. they come from outside. Some feedback is internal. It comes from inside. You notice something feels wrong. A sentence sounds strange to you. These are internal. They come from inside. Now, both types are important. The author explains that beginners need more external feedback. Advanced learners use more internal feedback. This is natural. For English learners, external feedback may be corrections from others. Internal feedback develops when your ear improves. The author explains that feedback is not criticism. Feedback is information. Information helps improvement. When you separate feedback from emotion, learning becomes easier. This emotional distance is a skill, so ultra learners develop thick skin. Thick skin means not being easily hurt by comments. This does not mean ignoring feelings. It means not letting feelings stop learning. So, at the end of this chapter, the author makes a powerful point. Mistakes are not the opposite of learning. They are the path to learning. Chapter 9. Retention. Keeping what you learn. This chapter answers a common question. Why do we forget so much? The author explains that forgetting is normal. The brain is not designed to remember everything. It remembers what it thinks is important. Retention means keeping information over time. Ultralearning improves retention by using information again and again, but not in the same way. The author explains that varied practice improves retention. Varied means changing the context slightly, changing the practice a bit. For example, using the word in different sentences. Different situations help memory become flexible. The author also talks about overlearning. Overlearning means practicing beyond basic success. For example, not stopping when you can speak a sentence once. You practice until it feels easy. Overlearning builds automaticity. Automaticity means doing something without conscious thinking. This is very important for language. You cannot think about grammar during real conversation. Automatic use is the goal. The author also explains the danger of cramming. Now, what does cramming mean? Cramming means studying the lot in a short time. Cramming creates temporary memory. Temporary means short term. Ultralearning prefers spaced practice. Spacing creates long-term memory. Long-term means lasting for a long time. The author reminds us that retention is not passive. You do not keep what you do not use. This is true for English. If you stop using English, fluency fades. It slowly disappears. Retention also depends on meaning. Meaningful learning is more effective. Meaningful means connected to real life. Learning random words is harder to keep than learning words you use. Okay, and now my friend, let's slow down. We have reached the end of this journey. We talked about focus. We talked about direct practice, drilling weak points, remembering actively, feedback, and retention. This book is not about studying harder. It's about studying honestly. Honest learning means looking directly at what you need, not hiding behind comfort, not waiting for perfect conditions. If you are learning English, Ultralearning gives you permission. Permission to speak before you feel ready. Permission to make mistakes. permission to choose real use over perfect knowledge. You do not need 10 more books. You need engagement. You need active involvement. A little every day. This is how confidence grows. It is the result of experience. Confidence is not the absence of fear. It is the result of experience. And I want to say something personal. Language learning is not a race. It is a relationship. A relationship grows with attention, patience, and honesty. If you show up consistently, English will respond. It will slowly stop feeling foreign. It will start to feel like a tool. And one day, it will feel like part of you. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of English Unleashed. I'm Tom, and until next time, keep learning, keep practicing, and keep believing in yourself. Bye for now.